Hi, I'm Soebbing from Quilt Addicts Anonymous, and today I'm going to teach you how to make my pattern Hillside. Hillside is available at quilt shops and also at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, so check your local quilt shop, see if they've got it there, and if not, you can get it from us online. Hillside's one of my favorite patterns because there's no neutral. So you can just pick up two jelly rolls that either are from the same line or coordinate really well with each other, and you can just mix and match and have some fun with them. I did the original one in batik, and I'm going to make my one today in Cave Spring 2018 in the bright colorway. Cave is really a great one to do a no neutral quilt in because most of his quilts are no neutral quilts. They're always really bright and funky, and so this is going to be a really bright and bold quilt, and it's really fast and really pretty simple, so it's definitely a beginner friendly quilt. So the first thing I need to do is take this apart. So that's the fun part, is taking these jelly rolls apart. Now there's lots of really fabulous and fun fabrics in here. If I unroll it, and you could get really fancy and arrange these all exactly as you want them, but I'm just going to start pulling from the top. Usually whenever these are put together, they're already in an order that's kind of pleasing to the eye, and I'm just going to start sewing them together. To find out exactly how many strips you need to use for this part, make sure you head on over to shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com or your local quilt shop to pick up a pattern or your copy of the pattern Hillside. So the first thing I'm going to do is set my sewing machine up to sew a 1/4 inch stitch. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab from there. Now I do want to make sure that I'm not sewing any two together. Like, it would not make sense to sew this one to this one because it's the same fabric. So I am going to mix and match a little bit that way, and kind of just go along the way and just grab them as I go. I've got the edge of the fabric even with the edge of my presser foot, and I'm just going to start sewing. Strip piecing, all I ever do is worry about whatever fits on top of my sewing machine throat plate. So I've got my fingers in between this, and then I kind of use that to line them up and get my edges nice and straight, and then I'll hold it steady with my fingertips and sort of let those come up with the fabric, and then I'm just going to keep zooming along. Alright, so I just finished sewing my first two sets together. Now I'm just going to keep going down the line and sewing more to it. So I've got this opened up, and since this fabric is the exact same as the one that's next to it, I'm going to go ahead and take this and leave it to the side for now, and I will use that at the end when it gets a little lighter again. But for right now, I'm just going to move on to the next orange, and I'm going to sew that to this yellow one right here. Now you could press in between every single one of these seams. I'm not going to for expedience sake. I find it a lot easier to sew everything together first and then press all my seams open than to get up and use the iron in between each seam. So now I've got 3 sewn together, and again, this orange is the same one as the one right next to it, so I'm going to put that to the side with the others, and I'm just going to keep on sewing until I've sewn all the strips together along the width of the fabric. And again, to get that number, make sure you go purchase Hillside from your local quilt shop or at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. So I'm just going to keep on sewing. You guys should keep on sewing at home, and then we'll come back when it's time to press all these open. So I've got a few extra strips. I'm going to save those for when I bind the quilt at the end. And now it's time to break into jelly roll number 2. For this one, I use the exact same roll as the first one, but this would look really fun if you had been collecting from a couple of lines from the same designer. Like if you've got all the Cave spring releases from now until the end of time, you could totally do this with that as well. Now we don't need as many strips for this next part as we did in the first one, so make sure you consult your Hillside pattern that you can get at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com to know how many you need. But one thing I'm going to do is, instead of starting with the dark on the top, I'm going to start with this light on the bottom, and that way when I put the strips together in the end, they're going to kind of alternate from dark to light, and they won't be right next to each other. The other thing you could do is you could just totally mix this all up crazy, but I think I'm going to get a good variation just by going in the opposite direction, and instead of starting with the dark, starting with this light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this strip out, and then on the left side, I'm going to basically cut off a dog ear on here. So if you line up the 45-degree line on your ruler, even with the selvage, and give it a cut, then we're going to get a nice 45-degree angle. Now the next one in this jelly roll is the exact same print, so I don't want to put those right next to each other, so I'm going to set this to the side and do the next print in the line, so that way I have variation as I sew these together. All right, so I'm going to line this one up again, and I'm going to cut a 45-degree angle off of that. Now I'm going to show you how to sew these guys together. It's basically the same as strip piecing, but a little bit different. So what we want to do is we want to offset this just a little bit. So basically, if I line this up, that 1/4 inch should be even with where this little valley is, where these two match up. You can kind of get used to eyeballing that once you've done it a few times, but if you need to pin the first couple, that's fine. So I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine, and keeping that offset, I'm going to go ahead and put my sewing machine to a 1/4 inch stitch. And I'm just going to sew down like I would any other strip piece. So when I get to the end, I'm going to have about 2.5 inches extra of the strip that's facing up, and that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be because we're doing everything offset. You can stop when you get to this point because there's no need to waste the extra thread to go all the way down, or you could sew all the way down. Totally up to you. So I have everything flipped around so that my tapered edge is now on the right. So I'm going to show you how to press this open. So what you want to do is just get that first part pressed open. And then what I do is I kind of finger press it open with my 3 fingers, and that kind of holds it nice and flat until I can come after it with the iron. Keeping the nose of that iron in that center seam works out really well. And now you can see that because we have that offset, we have a nice straight diagonal line. So when we're all done, we're going to turn this to the side and cut straight up, and we're going to get this nice diagonal piece. It's going to look really cool. Now you can wait to press all the seams until the very end when you've stripped all your pieces together, but from here on out, you're just going to continue stripping those diagonal pieces together, continuing to offset each one as you go until you have enough together to complete the pattern. All right, so we've got everything sewn together. Now it's time to cut it apart to make our really long strips to go up in our quilt. First, I'm going to show you how to cut the pieces that we sewed straight together, nice and parallel, and then I'm going to show you how to cut the slanted pieces. So our piece is really tall, so there's no way to cut it all in one swoop without making sure that it's nice and straight all the way up and down. So what I've done when I designed this is I made sure that the ones that we were going to cut were going to be no wider than the width of a standard 6 by 24 inch ruler. That way you can just use the lines on your ruler to measure. What I've done is I've laid the side that I started with on the left because this is nice and even. So I know I'm going to have a nice even one to do my first cut with because that's really important. So this first one, make sure you go to your pattern because not every one is 6 inches wide. So make sure you check out the Hillside pattern, which is one of our originals, over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, so you know how many strips to cut and what width because it varies a little bit. But what I'm doing is I'm going to line this up and I'm going to overcut it a little bit because I don't want to use those selvages. But what I'm doing is I'm kind of lining up my inch lines on some of these seams. And it looks like either the jelly roll wasn't cut perfectly straight because some of these are a little bit wider than the 2 inches they should be. But as long as you have some that are looking like they're even, like this one, the 1/4 inch is on, that's fine. You just need it to be as even as it can be. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim. And we're gonna trim this off after we're done with this to get it nice and square. So I'm just gonna pull everything to me. But I'm not gonna cut it all the way down. Like I can see right here is where my cut line is from the last one. So I'm gonna line it up, and now I'm gonna use a couple of points to square it up. So I have my ruler in line with the edge that I already cut, and then I'm continuing to use the ruler as a guide. I'm nice and straight, like that 1 inch line is like right on this seam, so I know that I'm still nice and square, so I can continue cutting up. So I'm gonna keep on doing that until I've cut my entire strip, and then I'm gonna show you how I square it up. All right, so I'm gonna put the width of it to the side for a little bit. I'm gonna flip this around so that the edge that I just cut is now on the left. And I'm gonna trim everything up. And this is real easy because it's just the same width as my 6-inch ruler. So I don't really have to do too much fussing with this. It just needs to be 6 inches straight up. But again, make sure you consult your pattern because not all of them are 6 inches wide. And I'm not gonna tell you what the other measurements are because we want you guys to, that's how we're able to do these videos, is by you guys buying our patterns. So go check that out if you really want to make this quilt. All right, so that was super simple. I just lined up the edge and cut straight down. I'm gonna go ahead and do that the rest of the way up. All right, we've got one strip down. We got a whole lot more to go. So go ahead and consult your pattern to figure out how wide these need to be, and go ahead and cut your strips, and then I'm gonna come back and show you how to do it on the slanted version. Now the slanted part is gonna work just a little bit differently. What we're going to do is we're gonna turn it so that the slant is now going straight up and down, perpendicular to your body. So what I'm gonna do is with that first raw edge that we started sewing together on the right, I'm gonna take this slant and I'm going to turn it perpendicular to my body. The reason why I'm gonna cut off this part on the left first is as you sew it, you may get off a little bit. And so if you get all the way to the bottom and you're just cutting your 6-inch piece to start with, you may only have like 5.5 inches once you get to the bottom. So the first thing I'm gonna do on this one is square up this right edge so that I have a nice straight edge to work with. So for this one, we want these to be at a 45-degree angle. So you've got a 45-degree line on your ruler that I'm gonna use to line up. So what I'm doing is I've got that 45-degree line on just any seam line is fine. And I'm moving it as close as I can to the edge here. Making sure everything's nice and flat. All right, now I'm gonna start cutting off the selvage and squaring everything up. All right, so I've got the straight edge on part of it. Pull everything down toward me. Now you may have to do this a couple of times if you find that you're kind of jogging in a little bit as you were sewing. You may need to take off a little bit more until you get to the point where you're gonna have a nice straight line all the way down. Okay, so when I do this, I can tell at the top of my board, when I have this even here, I'm now running out of fabric. It's coming in, it's too far. So I kind of got off a little bit when I was sewing that. So I'm gonna have to start over and take a little bit deeper slice. Okay, so I've got my 45-degree, I've got maybe a 1/2 inch or so that I'm taking off here. All right, now we are looking better here. So now when I'm lined up here, and then also at the 45-degree, I also have fabric hanging off the side all the way up for my next bit. Go ahead and slice up. I'm gonna keep doing that all the way up to the top until I have a nice straight line to work with. All right, once you have a square edge to work with, then you can go ahead and start cutting your pieces. Again, they're not all 6 inches, so make sure you consult your pattern to make sure that you cut the right amount so that way you can have the right amount of strips for your quilts. One thing you should do before you start is you should measure from your straight edge all the way over to where your jagged edge is. You should have at least 28 inches of width.
in order to make this pattern happen. If you don't, you just reduce the size of the strips you cut so that way you can get enough to go in your quilt in between the large strips. So no big deal if yours ended up being a little bit tiny by the time you squared it all up. Just reduce the width of the strip. It'll still look fabulous. It'll just be a little skinnier. All right, so I've got it lined up with that edge that I just cut, and I'm just gonna go ahead and slice up just like I did on the other one, except this time I'm cutting on a 45-degree angle and getting that cool downward sloping effect. Just like before, I'm not gonna pull it all the way down because I wanna be able to measure across this to make sure I'm square here and up here. Just keep on going until your entire strip is cut. One last thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and square up these edges. We're going to flip around which one goes in the top and the bottom and slice off the bottom when we're sewing it together. That'll make more sense when we assemble the top. But you want to start with a nice square edge. So to do that, do this top part first. I'm going to move it over as far as I can before this angle starts. Then I'm just going to slice it off so that we have a nice straight edge. I'm going to do the same thing down here. Move it as far over, keeping it square in between. Slice it up. And now we have a very cool strip that's going on the diagonal. Looks cool. Looks like you spent a lot of time making this, but it was just some strips that we cut up. So real cool. I'm going to finish cutting everything up and then we'll be back to sew everything together and finish your quilt top. So your straight sewn piece and your diagonal piece should be about the same length, but that could vary a little bit depending on how wide your jelly roll is. They're not exactly 2.5 inches all the time. And then also how good you are at sewing your quarter inch seam. Lots of things can impact that. So what I recommend doing is pinning everything together and keeping the top edge even every single time. And then when you're all done, go ahead and square up the bottom and it will just look fabulous and it will be great. So what I'm going to do first here is you also want to, when you're sewing, and this is good to know when you're pinning, you want to have this straight of grain piece be against the feed dogs, and that's because this bias is going to be stretchier, and so if you have any sort of issues with your feed dogs, it can get all stretched out of proportion and then you don't have a nice straight piece here. But if you have your straight of grain against your feed dog, that's less likely to happen. So what you're going to do is you're going to put these right sides together. And I've got it laid out in the way it's going to be going through my sewing machine. So the sewing machine is going to be over here to my left, and I'm going to be sewing my quarter inch seam here. So I'm lining up my tops. Just going to go ahead and pin every, I don't know, seam or so, all the way down. And you just kind of want to make sure that it's nice and even as you're going. You don't want to tug or pull any of those fabrics. Just make sure they're nice and even as you go.
If you wanted to and you had enough pins, you could get all your rows together at once and just chain piece them all through to speed this process up. All right, since this is one gigantic row, I'm going to go ahead and reinforce my stitches at the beginning. That way they don't kind of pull apart as I'm going through. And I'm just sewing, again, making sure that that straight of grain piece is on the bottom. That way I'm not stretching anything out of place as I sew. So again, for this one, I'm going to go ahead and press this seam nice and open. Just really like the way that it gets the seams really flat when you do it. So as you can see, we've got a little bit extra hanging off here. I'm going to go ahead and square that up now so we have nice even edges to work with as we sew our next pieces together. So to do that, I'm going to line up a ruler with an inch line and the bottom of that pinked edge. Be helpful if I had a larger ruler, but I have no idea where that ended up. So I'm just going to keep this nice and square and cut up the rest. And now we have a nice straight line to work with when we do our next strip. So if I just did top to bottom again, this would be kind of boring because we would just have another little pomegranate on this side. But if I flip it around, and instead I do what was at the top and put this at the bottom, then it's going to be a lot cooler to work with because then we have lots of different color variation. So each time I'm going to flip that around with the both the angled edge and the straight grain. So just like before, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to sew with this side down, but I'm going to pin it a little bit differently this time because I know that this is the exact same length as my other piece because they were all cut from the same piece that we sewed together at the same time. So it's important to kind of line it up to make sure that your seams here are lining up with your seams here, and that's really easy to see when the diagonal edge is on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it on this side, but then I'm going to sew it on the other side. So it's kind of backwards of the way I normally do it, but it's going to work out a lot better in terms of getting your final piece to look really good and really straight when you sew it together. I'm going to go ahead and pin at that corner, and then I can see that this is lining up really nicely right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm probably going to do like every other one because that would be a lot of pins if I did every single one. And so for this one, I'm going to bring it up a little bit so I can make sure that this seam is lining up with that one there. And if it ends up being off a little bit in the final quilt, that's going to be fine, but you don't want it to be like really big off as you're going through it. That'll be really obvious and it won't look good when it's seen as a big whole piece. All right, so we're a little off here. You can see that this one is down about a 1/4 inch or so than right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that up a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of ease things in as I go. But I can see now that this is nice and even, and I'll just ease it in just a tad bit as I'm sewing, and that'll make it a lot easier to work with. All right, already on this next one, we're nice and even again, so we'll be good. And the unevenness just comes from, you know, sometimes these aren't cut totally straight when they come out. And so, you know, there's a little bit of wiggle room. We all have worked with a jelly roll that is less than perfect, and that happens sometimes. So we just have to do a little bit of adjusting when we're sewing it together to make it look perfect when it comes out. So when I get a little bit closer to the end, I've got maybe about 2 feet or so to go. I'm going to work backwards so that way if there's any easing in to do, it'll be over a longer period of time rather than having to do it all at the beginning. So we're going to go ahead and work backwards at this point. So I almost always sew with the pin side facing up so that I can see the pointy end of my pin. This one I'm not. I'm going to flip it around, and again, that is so I have that straight grain on the bottom against that feed dog so things don't get stretched out. Just like before, I'm going to go ahead and press this seam open all the way down. So I'm going to alternate my fabrics again. So just like before, it would be pretty boring to have this yellow fabric at the bottom here and on the next row. I'm going to flip everything around. This is why we squared up both edges, even though we're always going to cut one off. So that way I have my darker fabrics down here, and that way I'm alternating each piece as I go. I'm going to pin this the same way as I did the last one, and making sure that my straight of grain is on the bottom always. And that's pretty much all you need to know to put this together. You're just going to keep adding rows until you are ending with a straight of grain, and then your quilt top is going to be together and you can quilt it however you like. Thank you so much for following along with this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, make sure you go to shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com and get the Hillside pattern. It is available as one of our Quilt Addicts Anonymous original patterns. And again, it just takes 2.5 inch strip rolls, and that is enough to do your binding as well. So pretty good deal. You don't have to get a ton of stuff. You just need a fabric line that you love and you want to use for your entire quilt. It's a no neutral quilt, so it's really kind of fun and bright and funky if you like that kind of thing. I know I do. But you could always get a more subdued line as well if you don't want it to be too wild. Make sure you check out our blog page, quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and click on the tutorial section. We have hundreds of free tutorials that you can watch, both videos and some just photo tutorials from earlier on in our blogging career. But we've got everything you need to make this project over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. At least at the time that I'm releasing this video, we do have the same jelly rolls that I used here. So you can check that out. If you end up getting a 404 link, it means that we don't have them anymore, but we always are getting lots in, so lots to choose from. You just need 2, and you are off and running to make this quilt. Thanks so much for following along, and until next time, happy quilting.